Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode number 137 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. We call these episodes Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like great food to bring people together. Now, go and check out our new book that we released a few weeks ago. It's called From Letters to Leaders, Creating Impact on Your College Campus and Beyond. We are blessed for the support of all of our listeners. Go out and pick that up on your Kindle. Only $2.99 right now. Or you can have the paperback shipped to you for $9.99 on Amazon. A great deal either way. Now, today we are going to have with us a lot of fun. We have with us Jay Shifman. Now, let me tell you about Jay. For much of his early life, Jay was told that he was living with a debilitating issue of mental health. As his condition worsened, Jay was prescribed more drugs at even higher doses until in his early 20s, Jay was taking more than the estimated lethal dosage of one drug and misusing many others while living with a full-blown issue of substance misuse thanks to prescription pills. At 23, after 2 suicide attempts, an overdose, and time spent in an inpatient hospital and a rehab facility, he decided enough was enough, and he pledged to himself to withdraw from all of these prescriptions. Over the next few years, many of his symptoms completely disappeared. Now he strives every day to end the stigma around the topics of mental health and substance misuse and recovery by telling his story and helping others to tell theirs. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm sorry that bio is really long. I'm gonna have to cut that down a little bit, but it's tough to get, when you're talking about these subjects, right? It's really important to establish that I'm not just talking about these things. I live them, and I live them at a time in my life when most people were, doing things like going to school, and I was doing it while going to school. Like that's when this was all happening. So it's in my opinion, very important to establish that, but it does get a little bit wordy sometimes.
No, I love it. I think it's a great intro. Obviously, tons of college students are struggling with some of the same things, whether we're talking about depression, whether we're talking about substance misuse, certainly prescription pills. I mean, here in Tennessee, I'm part of a coalition that's called Drug Free Wilco, and we're all about fighting the opioid crisis right now. And I tell you what, I mean, there is so much work to be done in that area. Luckily, the federal government and the state is sending us all kinds of grants, and we're doing some really good work on all of those areas. We're doing things like a diversion center to help people with first-time misdemeanor drug charges. We're doing education in the businesses and schools. We're doing a reentry transition specialist from the prison. So that way, when you're actually leaving the prisons and you're going back into society, that you have some help, because we're seeing a lot of overdoses literally within hours of leaving the prisons locally. And so there's so much work to be done, but I love that you share your story. I think it's really important that we talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I mean, college students need to hear your voice. Now, let's get a little bit of background on you. I think that's always helpful for our listeners to know where you came from. You went to the University of Cincinnati and then Northern Kentucky University. So talk to us a little bit about those experiences at those institutions. What was that like for you?
So here's the funny thing. I actually went to 4 schools. Those were the 2 that I spent the most time at. I started at the College of Worcester, which is in Worcester, Ohio, northern Ohio, and spent a year there and did not do well. I had a great time. Don't get me wrong, but did not do well, and transferred to the University of Cincinnati before I failed out, essentially. And all this time, I was dealing with being away from home for the first time. My mental health was deteriorating. My issues with substance misuse and eventually addiction were growing exponentially. And I had a major depression episode in my freshman year. All of that culminated in me leaving the school. I enrolled at UC, quickly found my fraternity, which was a blessing because, again, was not doing well in school. I've never been a good student. I was never taught how to be a good student. And with all these other issues I was going through, that fraternity was my lifeline. Now, when things got to the point that they did, as you heard in my bio, I did attempt suicide twice. I overdosed. And at that point, obviously, was no longer in school. I had actually failed out officially at University of Cincinnati. Went through a year of sort of rock bottom and regrowth, and went back to school in 2010 at Cincinnati State Technical College. My parents basically said, look, it's not that we don't trust you, but college is very expensive. You haven't had a great track record. Why don't we try at a place that's a little bit more affordable, hence Cincinnati State. And I did so well there that within a year, I was able to transfer to Northern Kentucky University, where for the first time I learned how to be a student. I had a very small class size. I mean, the largest class I was in was probably 25 people, and I really got to know my professors. And I took it seriously for the first time in my life, and did very well. Graduated in the time I was supposed to at that point, and got my degree in psychology at NKU, and I am forever in debt to NKU, and actually so much so that I went back to work there a couple of years later in their fundraising department. So can't say enough good things about Northern Kentucky University.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. And you know what? Listen, I mean, this kind of thing happens to a lot of college students trying to find themselves, trying to find their home. I'm so happy that the fraternity was there for you to support you. That I feel the same way about the fraternity. I feel like if it wasn't for the fraternity, I don't think I would have stayed in college, to be quite honest with you. I would have left, I would have went home. For me, it wasn't the grades, that wasn't the issue. It was just about feeling connected. And that is what really I needed, because I didn't have my family. I mean, I was going to school at the University of Buffalo, which is about an 8-hour drive from where I grew up near New York City. And, it's just for me, I need that foundation. I need that support. I need people to talk to about how my day went and just decompress. If I don't have that, I'm not going to be successful. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm such a proponent of the fraternity and sorority system, is because I know that there's other students like you and I who need that in order to be successful.
Yeah. I could not agree more. And obviously the last couple of years, or even longer than that, when we see stories about fraternities and sororities, they're always in a negative light. That's what gets news attention. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that the answer to that is not abolishing the system itself, but is doing things like what I try to do, which is better education for fraternity and sorority members about how to be a better member of that fraternity and sorority for your brothers and sisters. There is a sense of belongingness that I found when I was a member of AEPI, the Jewish fraternity at the University of Cincinnati, that I wouldn't have found other places. Just was not possible. And I'm not alone in that, as you're saying perfectly yourself. So I do believe that a lot of these places can be a home, but they need to be taught how to be better family members for those that are in the system with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what, being a part of a fraternity or sorority, I mean, you should have 50, 60, 70 eyes on you at all times. And I feel like for people who are struggling with mental health, this is, kind of an early warning system to say, wait a minute, Jay hasn't left his room in 3 or 4 days. Like, what's going on? Right. And so to have those eyes and ears on you at all times, I think is beneficial, as opposed to maybe nobody is checking in on you. So
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, totally. So talk to us about AEPI. What made the Brothers of AEPI special to you? Why did they stand out?
AEPI, when I was at the University of Cincinnati, was sort of a misfit organization. We honestly, unlike a lot of other fraternities and sororities, the only thing we had in common was that we all identified as Jewish. So unlike, some of the other ones that they're all, athletes or whatever the case is, all business majors, we only had that in common. So we were a very diverse group of guys in terms of our interests in life and who we are as people. So that's what I found the most compelling, was that it was a lot of the guys that I gravitated towards were people like myself who would probably not have been in a fraternity otherwise. I rushed a couple of other ones. In fact, my dad is an alumnus of DTD, and checked them out, and I was not a good fit. And so, that was how I was feeling about fraternities at the time, until I met a couple of the other members of API, and they all said, dude, you'd fit right in here. Please come check it out. It took some convincing, and then I finally went. And the first day I was like, oh, I belong here, so much so that even while I was rushing, I'd already moved into the house. I was like, this is where I'm going to be. This is where I belong.
That's fantastic. And, I think that's a good lesson also for freshmen that are in college. Just go out and check and figure out what's your home that may or may not fit in with what you expected, that may or may not be, your legacy fraternity, like in your case with your father. It's just different from campus to campus. API is different from campus to
Mm-hmm.
campus. And that might have been your home at the University of Cincinnati, but if you went to another chapter, maybe it wouldn't have worked out so well.
Yeah.
So, you really just got to go and check it out. I mean, these things change from campus to campus. And I firmly believe that there is a home for everybody on any particular campus, but you got to go out and find it and you got to go and figure it out. So that's great that you found it. And now you've decided to dedicate your life to making a difference around mental health, which I think is amazing. And when students struggle with their mental health in college, talk to us about what resources are available to them, because I'm sure there's a lot of students right now that are struggling and they don't know where to go.
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and I also, look, I'm in my mid 30s. I'm 10 plus years out of this, 15 years out of this, and so this is changing all the time. But what I hear a lot when I talk to people who are still doing this work in colleges is, sadly, the answer is not a lot. We are still underfunding our mental health help everywhere. I mean, this is not a university issue, right? This is an everywhere issue. And insurance is a big part of that. There's a lot of insurance companies who it's not that they're standing in the way, but they're not exactly proactive in helping around mental health. But universities are trying in some places. I know I was just talking to a guy on my podcast not long ago who helped his university create a more robust mental health service. So the answer is always to start at your local health center. And unfortunately, like I said, odds are you may not have the best experience, but it's always worth a shot because many people do have incredible experiences. The sort of overlying answer, however, though, is the simplest one, which is just the people around you. I'm actually wearing a shirt right now that just says, "Hey there, are you good?" Because that's how we have to address this. The same way if you saw somebody limping down the street, I would hope you'd rush to help them out. If you know someone well enough, you can see the same sort of impact on their mental health as that, egregious example about their physical health. So reaching out to people you're around. And again, I say this as a person who attempted suicide twice and lived through an overdose. I know how hard that can be. I didn't do it myself. So I'm telling you sort of to practice what I'm preaching, not what I did, because I was wrong. So reach out to the people in your lives if you're struggling. And if you know someone that you're worried about, there are ways, and I do this training myself about how to have that conversation. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I know, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, men in particular, I think we really struggle having that conversation and saying, are you thinking of killing yourself? Like those words, that's a really hard thing to say if you don't practice it and talk about those kinds of things openly in your fraternity. And so I think that's the challenge right there.
Yep. Yeah, and again, that there is a very well researched and established method about how to walk somebody through that conversation so that it takes a little of the fear away from both sides, right? You're right. If I didn't know you that well, even if I did, but we weren't real close, saying that to you, like, are you thinking like that's terrifying?
Yes.
But if you follow this very well established method, there's different questions to ask, there's different ways to open that conversation. It can take a lot of that fear away, and it can make it much more I don't want to say easy because it's never easy. That's not the right word, but much more accessible, I think, is a better way to put that. And as I say on my podcast a lot, the easiest way to do this is that vulnerability begets vulnerability and empathy begets empathy. If we wanted someone to open up to us, the answer should never be like, you have to tell me, like getting angry, like that's just never going to work. Right. I mean, if someone did that to us, we would immediately shut down. But the right way to do it is by being open first, being a person that person you're worried about knows they can trust and knows they can come to because you've been vulnerable with them. So next time you're thinking about something like that, oh man, how do I start this conversation? Just talk to them about yourself first, and let them know, hey, that's a guy that I can talk to.
Yeah, that's the key really to everything within fraternity and sorority life, in my opinion, is that vulnerability and that sharing. That's what people are attracted to. It's not the fake stuff, it's being vulnerable. That is what really anchors me to the
Yeah.
brotherhood and to the sisterhood. And, I think fraternity men and sorority women are in a great position to intervene when they see their brothers or sisters with substance misuse. So, what are some of the warning signs that they should be looking out for?
Yeah, so this one is a little bit, we're going to obviously attack this from 30,000 feet because it's different for every person, but there are a couple of universal signs. Losing enjoyment in something the person typically enjoyed or very recently enjoyed is a very big sign of any sort of behavioral change. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be substance misuse or mental health struggles. It could be that, their family's having trouble at home and they're keeping a lot of that bottled in. But that sort of change is a red flag that you should immediately say, okay, I need to talk to this person. Withdrawing, as you already said, if that person hasn't left their room, if they're not appearing for, community events or whatever it is that you normally do together, that's also another big red flag. And again, it doesn't have to mean one of these things. It can mean anything. Maybe their grades are struggling and they're scared they're going to fail out of school. Who knows? But those are the sort of big red flags where you go, all right, I should intervene because maybe they don't have anyone they feel they can talk to, or maybe they're thinking about something horrible and they just want someone to reach out. Those are some pretty big ones. But looking for other red flags like that is always the first sign. Maybe they're just physically sick. Who knows? But there's never a bad moment to check in. So definitely, let that be your baseline. Even if you're a little scared, nothing bad's going to come of you checking in. So if you're worried about it, check in.
Yeah, that's great advice. One of the things that I'm very concerned about right now is suicide on college campuses. As executive director of the fraternity, I saw this kind of escalating every single year, that the number of suicides was climbing, the number of mental health issues within our fraternity is climbing. And so that's very, very concerning for me, that trend. So, how can we develop a culture in our fraternities and sororities to have these types of open communications before an incident like this, like a suicide, happens?
Yeah, as I was saying before, the vulnerability piece is huge. That vulnerability begets vulnerability and empathy begets empathy. If you feel that you can be vulnerable, you're going to be more vulnerable. We all have those relationships in our lives where we know, okay, that's a person that I can open up to. And then we have other people where we feel, okay, I've done that. It didn't go well. And maybe that's a person I shouldn't. As far as the fraternity aspect or the sorority aspect, I can remember, sitting in fraternity meetings and feeling like this isn't a place that I can really be myself, be open, because there are people who take this very seriously. Not that that is wrong, but it's more about the Robert's Rules of Order and all that kind of stuff. When, let's be honest, that's not really the most important thing here. It's the communal aspect of it. It's the fraternity aspect of it. So maybe having a time in those where it's more open, where people feel that they can discuss things and not being afraid they're going to be shut down if they try to have a real conversation, as opposed to something surface level because it says so in the agenda, whatever the case is. And or I served a term as we basically the outreach brother in my fraternity, where I was the person that people knew that they could come to if they just needed to talk about something. So making sure that not only do you have that position at your fraternity, but that person is trained in all of these aspects, everything from harm reduction techniques like Narcan training. We had that at my fraternity. About we had the sober watchdog for every party, just in case somebody got into physical trouble, or these mental health techniques about knowing how to have a real conversation around suicide and a vulnerability exercise to help people feel more comfortable. It's one thing to put someone in that position. That's wonderful. That is definitely step one. But making sure that person's getting the training they need. And by the way, these are things you can find online. I've been certified in mental health first aid twice over now, and I paid $20 for the most expensive one, right? Narcan training is everywhere. It's all over all of our cities. For getting certified in CPR. I mean, these are things that person should be doing. And the only hesitation now in the age of the internet, when everything is online, is making time. So definitely empowering that person to do that, I think, is an incredible step in the right direction.
All great ideas. I love the outreach, brother, that you talked about, empowering somebody to be looking out for these types of issues and somebody who's trained on how to talk about these things. I think that is absolute gold. I think that is fantastic. You have this course that's called Mindfulness Beyond Meditation, and not everybody does meditation well. I mean, let's just start there. I mean, for some people, it's like magic and they just take off. That's great, but that's not everybody. So if I don't do meditation well, how do you achieve a high level of mindfulness?
Yeah, if you don't do meditation well, you are in the majority. You know, we have been led recently to believe that like meditation is this miracle pill and that everyone can do it. And if you can't, you're the problem. It's all ridiculous. Look, I literally do this for a living, and I have never found the benefit of meditating to be what I want it to be, which is why I created this course. Because when I started this work 6 years ago, I had to go looking for these other techniques, and it was a lot of work to find out what worked for me and what didn't. And the fact that meditation gets 99% of the conversation, even though it's just one technique out of many, you know, that's what I was trying to fix with this. So my course has 10 different, I think, techniques that people can try. You know, for me, I would say the biggest one in my life is something called the daily check-in. It's basically a form of journaling. All you do is you sit down for a couple minutes. I use my phone. I don't even use a journal. I open up the notepad function on my phone and I write the words I feel, and then I complete the sentence. And when you first start doing it, you know, when I started this probably 3 or 4 years ago, it's very surface level. I feel angry, I feel hungry, whatever the case is. But once you start working on this a little bit more, you start tapping into your subconscious and getting down there and really figuring out, okay, I feel angry, but why do I feel angry? You know, I feel lonely, but what is it that I'm missing? And not only do you start to understand yourself better, but you start figuring out, okay, what can I address on my own? What do I need professional help on, like a therapist? And then what's that middle ground? Okay, I don't have the techniques for this. Maybe I can find answers online, or maybe I can hire a person like me as a mental health coach to help you with some of that stuff. So it has been such an incredible benefit in my life starting this technique. And it's just one of the many ones that I do every day or every week that helps me figure out where I am in my head, where I am in my life, and what do I need to focus on right now.
That's beautiful. That's another great suggestion. And I love that you're breaking the stigma on seeing a therapist. I think, seeing a therapist has been one of the best things that I've ever done. And I hope that more people get an opportunity to try that. If you haven't and you're struggling, it's okay to say that you can't solve everything on your own. It's okay to say, I need to talk to somebody about these feelings that I'm having, because I tell you what, boy, if I had to do it all over again, I would have started therapy years ago.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I
such
couldn't agree
a
more. And that is something that a lot of colleges offer is a therapist. However, they're overworked and they're underpaid. And so that's where people like myself, who are mental health coaches, step in. You know, quite frankly, you shouldn't be spending time with your therapist talking about things like mindfulness. I mean, that is literally surface level, right? I mean, those are incredible techniques, but if you can learn it from someone who doesn't have a PhD and isn't going to charge you all that money, like, that's a good thing. You know, the reason people like me exist is that we're taking that off your plate so that when you go to your therapist, you can say, okay, I've worked on all of this stuff, but man, this one, I just have no idea what to do with this. And that's where the therapist is huge. So, this is definitely an industry that's growing. I liken it to like in the 60s when the physical trainer didn't exist, right? If you went to someone about your physical health, it was a doctor. And now, of course, we have this robust community of physical trainers. That's happening now in the mental health space, but we're still, we're at 10% capacity right now. So I feel it for people who cannot find help. And I say this all the time, reach out to me. If I can't help you, I will definitely guarantee you I'll turn you on to someone who can. We need more people at this table. So the people who are looking for help, the help is available, but it is hard to find. So I feel you on that.
Yeah, I love that option as a coach. I think you've really tapped into something, and hopefully our audience is going to contact you for some help as a coach, because that's what I hear over and over again from the college students is that I would love to see a therapist, but the wait time is like a month, 2 months. And it's like, I mean, how you can't wait that long. I mean, if you have a mental health crisis, the crisis is now, it's not a month from now. And so hopefully the coaches, like you're talking about, kind of fill that gap that exists where we don't have enough therapists to see all of the students that need one.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's really nice. Now, you also have some experience in fundraising strategies. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit because, you understand fundraising and you understand fraternity. Right now, college students are tapped out financially. I mean, jobs are hard to come by. So how can college student organizations do a better job and meet their fundraising goals?
Yeah, so I would say number one that it takes money to make money. I know that is the hardest thing to hear, but it does. Dedicating some of your funds to working with a professional. I did this for a decade, and I still occasionally will consult for certain organizations, but there are people who are trained in this the same way that you wouldn't go just try to do, I don't know, dentistry by yourself. Fundraising is similar. It is pulling teeth. So definitely finding somebody who can help you out with that is number one. But for the everyday people, all of you in the fraternity or the sorority, figuring out how you can help out with this, the easy answer is living the mission. You are a walking advertisement for this organization. If you don't enjoy it enough to want to be out front and center, that kind of says something about the organization, right? If you are finding this home that you and I are talking about today, you should want to sing the praises of this organization, right? I mean, there's a reason that so many of us went around wearing our letters. We were proud of being in this organization. And so waking up every day and realizing that you alone have this opportunity, that's the best thing you can do. I remember, I don't even know if they do this anymore, but dorm storming, if that's still a thing, when we would go in to help the freshmen move in looking for our prospects, that's why that worked so well, is because we would walk in with our letters on. We would be having a wonderful time. We'd be talking to the parents, talking to the girlfriend, and that kid wants to join your organization because like, oh my God, these guys, I would definitely love to hang out with them. It's the same thing with fundraising. If you're letting these people know, look, I love this, let me tell you about how it's making a change in my life, they're going to feel that excitement. They're going to feel that wonder and love from you, and they're going to want to help out in any way they can. Finally, there's an old adage: you ask someone for advice, they give you money. You ask them for money and they give you advice. So make sure that you are asking someone for both. Say, look, we're struggling with this, or you work in this industry, how can I best be like you? That person's going to take a vested interest, and that might be advice, it might be opening doors for you, or it might be check out other pocket.
That's all very, very good advice. I would tell the students who are listening right now, don't forget about your alumni, and also don't forget about your parents. You see, alumni and parents are more likely to donate towards a cause if they have another alumnus or another parent asking them. So, make sure that you're thinking about that, because sometimes the undergraduates take it all on themselves and they don't recognize all the tools and the resources that they have available to them if they just ask. So the key is to really kind of recruit somebody who knows what they're doing, to your point. But number two, that is also an alumnus, because when another alumnus asks, I'm probably a little bit more likely to say yes. That's the weird thing about fundraising.
100%. And tap into what they miss about the fraternity. Like I said, my dad wasn't an API, but he loved his fraternity days. I grew up hearing stories about his fraternity days. So yes, he understood the importance of it, and the importance of the fraternity existing in the future. So yes, that's a great advice. Definitely look for places where other people who had that experience congregate, because they're going to be much more open. And then ask them to tell you stories, right? Again, get them to buy in, and then you got them.
Yeah, I love it. That's a really good strategy. Now, you talked a little bit earlier about your own podcast. It's called Choose Your Struggle. So what types of guests, what types of topics are you exploring on your podcast?
Yeah, so Choose Your Struggle is dedicated to 3 topics: mental health, substance misuse and recovery, and drug use and policy. I was looking around and seeing a lot of incredible podcasts on those topics, but they were all led by people who spent 20 years getting their PhD, and we're bringing on other researchers. And again, that's needed. There's so much room for that, and I want 1,000 more podcasts like that. What I wasn't seeing is someone with lived experience bringing on this sort of much needed gap of people with lived experience, people who get these topics, and people who are willing to think a little bit differently about these topics, which is why I started this podcast. It's now about a year and a half old, going on 100 episodes. And I've talked to everyone from some researchers and people who've written incredible books to people with lived experience. I think the most well-known guest I had is a woman by the name of Katie Hill, former Congress member who resigned after a really big mental health struggle. She and I sat down last year, not long after this, and really got into it, got into the topic, and it was heartbreaking at times. I've had former athletes talking about their struggles I've had other podcast hosts, people who work in the recovery industry, all over the map. But those are the big ones. And the only aspect you have to come on my show is you cannot think that your way is the only way. That is the one thing that will get you uninvited. If you come on and say, well, this is how I did it, so this is how it's going to work. As a person in recovery, I can tell you right off the bat, that ain't true, because I know my way isn't going to be good for everybody. And I know that your way isn't going to work for me. So as long as you're open to talking about all different kinds of ways, I'd love to have you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you're doing the lived experiences and you're sharing that. I think it's so critical. One of the grants that I'm working on right now is a psychostimulants grant. So it's really meth is what we're talking about and trying to tackle that in Tennessee. And what we're going to do is we're going to station peer navigators in the emergency room, at the local emergency room, to basically, because people will walk in with substance use disorder, with psychostimulants use disorder, and just looking for solutions. And they're walking into the emergency room saying, I don't know where else to go. And so if we could have a peer navigator, somebody who is basically through recovery, to help them, to refer them to a place locally to get the treatment that they need, whether it be MAT or whatever. It's a little bit trickier with psychostimulants than it is with opioids. But that being said, I think the peer navigator, that program is so useful, because instead of working with a doctor or a nurse, somebody who is a medical doctor and all of that, now we have somebody with lived experience to say, you know what, I've been exactly where you're at right now, and I'm telling you that hope and healing is possible. And this is how we're going to do it.
It's so interesting that it took us this long, and sadly, this is new-ish. I mean, this is within the last 10 years that this really has grown into an industry, the peer recovery supporter, because that is what AA was built on for 100 years, right? There is no medical science, there's no treatment in AA except for being together instead of with people who understand what you went through. And for literally 100 years, AA had the sort of patent on that. And now people are going, wait a minute, we can do that with science. We can do that in other places, and you're seeing the success rates start to skyrocket. It's very sad it took it this long. I didn't have it when I went through this. I'm 11 years in recovery, and when I had two options when I was in the recovery: basically do it myself or go to AA. So I tried AA, and here's a guy again. My issue was prescription pills, and this was before the opioid epidemic exploded. And they honestly said to me, kid, what are you doing here? These are guys with 20 years of drinking under their belt. And here I am with pills. They're like, we don't even know what to say to you. Right. So I felt very alone. And so having people like what you're saying, who have been there and can say, hey, I did that. Let me tell you about what worked for me. Let me tell you a bunch of different ideas that could possibly work for you. It is literally night and day, and it's going to save a lot of lives.
I agree. We should have gotten to this point much sooner, but I'm happy to be part of the solution today. I mean, that's all I can do. I can't fix what happened over the last 20 years, but I can fix today and try to help. So hopefully we'll do that, and that'll spread to more emergency rooms around the country. We do love good food here at Fraternity Foodie, and you happen to be in Philly, one of the places, the best places really in the country for good food. I mean, let's just call it what it is. So what is your favorite restaurant in Philly? I need to know this.
So I just moved. I've been here not that long, and I will say you're not wrong. It's hard to choose because everywhere I've been so far is just incredible. So I'm not ready to pick my favorite yet, but I will say I moved from Charleston, South Carolina, and Rodney Scott's barbecue is worth the hype. I mean, I know it's in all the travel mags and all that, but we went so many times. It is so incredibly good. And before that, I moved from Cincinnati, Ohio. So that I am a huge fan of Skyline Chili. I can't go an opening day or even just a regular day without it. I cannot get enough Skyline Chili.
Those are two great suggestions. And, I'm living in Nashville, Tennessee, so I know something about good barbecue. So I'm going to have to check that out and see if it really hits the bar or not. So I'll check that out next time I'm in town. That sounds really good. So, all right. So if our listeners who are listening right now, they want to contact you, maybe they want to book you to speak on their campus, where is the best place for them to go and connect with you?
Definitely. Well, first off, I'd love to hear from you. I say this every time I get interviewed, but please reach out. Again, as someone who lived through a suicide attempt and an overdose, I know how hard it can be. And if you truly don't believe there's anyone in your life you can talk to, please reach out. I've had people reach out. I mean, seriously, no joke, on TikTok, because they're just like, hey, I need someone to talk to, right? So definitely reach out. You can find me on my website, which is just jayshifman.com, JAYSHIFMAN.com, or you can find me on social media. I'm Jay Shifman or Choose Your Struggle on all of them. Please don't reach out on TikTok. I'm never on there. I don't want to miss your message. But if that's the only one you're on, fine, reach out to me over TikTok. But definitely reach out. I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm with you on the TikTok. I mean, I know there's a lot of potential on TikTok. I have an account. I haven't really fully developed it. I think I'm going to spend some more time over the next month to develop it because that's where the students are at. But
Yep,
I'm like,
right.
I'm not really much of a dancer, so I don't really know what I can offer you.
I'll tell you what, man, you and I are a little old for TikTok, even though I used to be a dancer. And the last time I really tried to get down with a couple of guys from my high school troop, I was in my fraternity and I blew out my knee. Like, no joke. We were trying to show my fraternity brothers, this is what we did in high school. And I dislocated my knee and I was like, well, that's the end of my career. My dance career is over today. So I'm with you, but us old guys got to stick to the more tried and true, like Instagram and Facebook or something.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Listen, Jay, this has been a lot of fun. It's been great catching up, and I absolutely love this. Thank you for sharing your story. I think it starts with that authenticity. I think it starts with the vulnerability, like you talked about, and you are living that every single day. So God bless you for sharing your story. Thank you very much for being a resource for the students, whether it be on TikTok or anywhere else, because you know what? I mean, you're going to be saving lives with that message, and I just appreciate you.
Well, I think really appreciate you having me here today and giving me this platform, and anyone listening, look, reach out. It's going to get better. I am living proof of that. 11 years later, I can't imagine what I was thinking that night, or I can, but I wish I wasn't. So definitely reach out. And thank you, Michael, so much for having me.
My pleasure. Hope and healing is possible. Jay is living proof of that for everybody who is listening. So if you like this, please like this podcast episode. Please share it with others that might be struggling with mental health. And then this Jay is a great resource for you to reach out to. Check him out at jayshifman.com. Thank you so much to our listeners. We'll see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much. See you next time.